Hello everyone, and welcome to today's third grade math lesson. This will be part 2 for word problems using multiplication, and for this lesson you will need paper and pencil as well as some counting manipulatives. So about 30 to 40 beans, beads, gold stars, whatever you have. And so on the agenda for today, we are first going to review some vocabulary terms. After that, we'll be talking about 3 strategies that we can use when we're solving for word problems involving multiplication. Then we'll be solving for some word problems that involve equal groups, arrays, and measurement quantities, such as those found in recipes. And finally, we will conclude and recap our lesson. So first, let's go over our vocabulary. Our first word is going to be multiplication, and multiplication is when we multiply the number of rows by the number of columns to find the product, and the product is like the answer when it comes to multiplication. So here I have 5 rows, and I want to multiply it by 2 columns to find our total product. So if I have 5 rows, I'm going to get 5 stars out. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows, because rows are horizontal, going left and right. And then I need 2 columns, so I'm going to make a second column that also has 5 stars. So again, I have 5 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now I have 2 columns. Columns are vertical, so going up and down. So 1, 2 columns. So I have 5 rows by 2 columns, and what I need to do is find the product, which is the answer for this multiplication equation. So I'm going to count up all my stars. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 total stars, so 10 is my product, my answer. So our next vocabulary word is going to be division. Division is when you take your largest number, which is like the total, and you divide it or split it equally between a certain number of groups to give you the number in each group. So I'll show you what I mean. So say I have a total of 10 stars here, my total of 10, and I want to divide my 10 stars equally between 2 groups. So if I put 1 star in one group, I have to put 1 star in the second group. I'm going to put a second star in both groups, a third star in both groups, a fourth star in both groups, and a fifth star in both groups. Notice that these are equal groups, which we'll get to in a second. So I have 10 stars, and I divided them into 2 groups, 1 and 2. Now we have to count up the number of stars that are in each group to give us our quotient or our answer. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we have 5 gold stars in each group. That's our quotient or our answer. So that's what division is. You take your total number, you divide it by the number of groups, and it gives you the number that is in each group. So our next vocabulary word is equal groups, and this means that the same amount needs to be in both groups. So for example, if one group has 5 stars, then the second group also needs to have 5 stars. Or if one group has 2 stars, then the other group also has to have 2 stars. It wouldn't work if one group had 2 stars and the other group had 1 star. Those would be unequal groups, and those don't work. We have to have equal groups. So 2 stars and 2 stars. Those are equal groups, the same amount in each group. Another vocabulary word is arrays, and arrays are rows by columns. So for example, here we have a 2 by 3 array. That's how it's read, 2 by 3. So this would say 2 rows and 3 columns. That's what it would specify. So 2 rows, so we've got 1 row, second row, and we need 3 columns. So I'm going to make a column here and another column here. Okay, so now we have 2 rows, and 3 columns, 3 columns. And our last 2 words are going to be product and quotient. So product is the answer for multiplication. So example, 5 rows of 2 columns equals 10. 10 is our product. And quotient is for division. So quotient could be something like 10 divided by 2 equals 5. 5 is our quotient. So again, product is a term used for multiplication, and quotient is a term used for division. So those are our vocabulary terms. Now let's review some strategies that we use when solving for word problems that involve multiplication. So we have 3 main strategies that I want to point out in this lesson. So we have drawings, manipulatives, and equations. So for our first one, drawings, that's kind of when we use dots or squares or circles to represent the numbers. So for example, if we're given 2 times 3 and we need to find out what that product is, we could use dots. So here we have 2 rows by 3 columns, so we could use dots to write 1 and then 2, so 2 rows and then 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. So again, dots are representing the array. Now, we could also use manipulatives such as stars, beads, beans, whatever you have. So these kinds of things. And that can also be helpful. So for example, for 2 times 3, we would go, okay, so 2 rows. So we've got 1, 2 rows, and then 3 columns. So I'm going to add some more columns. Okay, so now we've got 2 rows and 3 columns. So that's using the strategy of manipulatives. So again, drawings can use dots or something else that you write on your paper, and manipulatives can use stars, beads, whatever you have. Now our last strategy is equations. So you can write a multiplication equation or a division equation to help you solve for either the product or the quotient. So in this case, we have 2 rows times 3 columns, or 2 rows by 3 columns. And if you know your multiplication facts, then you know that 2 times 3 equals 6. 6 is the product or the total. You can also use an equation for division, which is your quotient, which is kind of like, or your total number, divided, which means shared equally, among the number of groups to find the number in each group. So for example, if I had 6 stars total, and I wanted to divide them into 2 groups, I'd put a star in my first group, a star in my second group, then a second star in my first group, and a second star in my second group, and a third star in my first group, and a third star in my second group, to find the answer, or quotient of 3. So again, 6 divided into 2 groups, 1, 2, equals 3 stars in each group, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So that's how you do division, using equations. The last thing I wanted to review really quick is what the general formula for word problems is going to look like. So kind of like what we should immediately think of for word problems. So we have what I know and what I need to know. So after we read a word problem, it's always good to kind of recap or summarize the information. So for a what I know section, we would write down the information that they gave. Maybe they said there were 6 stars total, or that there would be 3 groups, that kind of thing. So that's for the what I know section. There's also what I need to know. That would be kind of what you're solving for. Am I looking for the product, a bigger number? Am I looking for the quotient, a smaller number? It's all about what I need to know in order to solve the problem. So now that we've talked about the vocabulary as well as 3 strategies to use for word problems, it's time to actually work on some word problems. So I have our first one here, and on your piece of paper, I want you to write what I know, and then leave some space to write, as well as what I need to know, and then some space. So if you want to, you can pause the video to give you enough time to write those 2 phrases down. Okay, so after you're all done with that, we are going to look at this word problem and try to make some sense of it to be able to tell what I know and what I need to know. Okay, so let's look at the table first. So we have flour, 1 cup, 4 cups, and we have eggs, 2 eggs, and number of eggs. Okay, so it gives us some information right away. And now let's read the word problem that goes with it. This is a recipe for lemon bars. If I want to make 4 times the amount of lemon bars, how many eggs will I need? And I just wanted to note really quick, this is only part of a recipe. You don't need just flour and eggs, you would also need other ingredients, but just a little note. Okay, so again, it's saying if I want to make 4 times the amount of lemon bars, how many eggs will I need? Okay, so first let's look at this part right here. Let's look at our flour. So it went from 1 cup to 4 cups. And we know that any number multiplied by, so here, let me rephrase that. So we have 1, and we get to 4 by multiplying that same number. So if we have 1 and 4, we get to it by multiplying 4. So 1 times 4 equals 4. And it also says if I want to make 4 times the amount of lemon bars. So again, this is cluing us into the fact that we're going to need to multiply by 4. So I'm going to underline that 4 times. So I'm going to underline 4 times. Okay, so we know that we're going to have to multiply 2, because 2 eggs, by 4 to get the number of eggs that we'll need total. Okay, so I'm going to write 2, because 2 eggs, times 4, because 4 times, equals, and then I'll write a question mark. Okay, so we have our what I know section on the paper. So we know that we have 2 eggs. So let's write 2 eggs. And we also know that we need to find 4 times the number of eggs. So I'm going to write the multiplication sign and then write a 4. So we're really saying 2 eggs times 4 and then equals, and then how many eggs is what we're looking for. We're looking for that product. Okay, and our next section is what I need to know. So we need to know the product. We need to know how many eggs we will need to make 4 times the amount of lemon bars. So we're going to write product. We need to find the product. Okay, so we can solve this 3 different ways, and our first one is to draw it. So let's try drawing to find the answer. So we have 2, and I'm going to write rows underneath to help me remember. You can do the same for you. And then underneath the 4, I'm going to write columns to help me remember. So again, rows times columns equals, and then the number of eggs that we're looking for. Okay, so to draw this, we need to draw 2 rows. So 1, 2, because again, first row, second row, and then we need 4 columns. So I'm going to add more columns. So if I did this number, would that be correct? Would that be 2 rows by 4 columns? It would not. It would be 2 rows by 3 columns, because 1, 2, 3. We need 2 rows with 4 columns. So I'm going to keep on adding some columns. There we go. Okay. So now we have 2 rows, 1, 2, by 4 columns. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 2 rows by 4 columns. So we drew those dots, and now we have to add them all up to get the total number of eggs that we will need for 4 times the amount of lemon bars. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You could have also counted them up a different way, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It doesn't matter how you count it up, as long as you get that same total number. So I'm going to write the equal sign, and you can do the same on your paper. Equals, and then 8, because we found out there were 8 dots, which stand for the eggs. So 8 eggs. 8 eggs. Okay, so we figured that out using our strategy of drawings. Now it's time to do the same thing, but using a different strategy. And that strategy is going to be manipulatives. Manipulatives. Okay, so you can use your beans or your beads or your gold stars, whatever you want. And we're going to do 2 rows times 4 columns. So with our gold stars or beans or beads, you're going to do 2 rows. So we've got 1, 2. Remember, rows are horizontal, going left to right. And then you're going to add some columns. So here's my second column. Here's my third column. And here's my fourth column. And let's always double check to make sure we have the right number of rows and columns. So we've got 1, 2, so 2 rows, and then 4 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4 for the 4 columns. Okay, so we have 2 rows by 4 columns, which is correct. And now we have to add up all of our gold stars, or eggs, to figure out the total number of those eggs. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 stars or 8 eggs. So I'll write equals and then 8 eggs. Notice that the answer that we got by drawing is the same as the answer that we got using our manipulatives. Again, these are 2 different strategies, but they get us the same product, the same answer. Now for our very last strategy, this one is going to be equations. So we're going to write a multiplication equation. And we actually are very close to one already, because up here we have 2 rows times 4 columns equals So our equation would be 2, because 2 rows, times 4. So again, 2 eggs, 4 times the number of eggs. So 2 times 4 equals, and if you know your multiplication facts, then you know that 2 times 4 equals 8. And if you don't know your multiplication facts, that's also okay, because we used our two strategies of drawings and manipulatives to find that the total number of eggs would be 8 here and 8 here. So both times it'd be 8. So you can write 8. And then we'll add our unit, in this case, eggs. We always want to say 8 what? 8 eggs in this case. So 2 times 4 equals 8 eggs. So that's our equation. So to answer the question for how many eggs will I need, I would need 8 eggs total to make 4 times the recipe. So instead of 2 eggs, I would use 8 eggs. So 2 times 4 equals 8. Let's try another word problem. So for this one, there's actually going to be an extra step, but I will walk you through it, so we'll be all good. Okay, so let's read it first. So the cake recipe called for 4 eggs, and Jess wanted to make 3 cakes. How many eggs would she need? Okay, so on our piece of paper, find a new spot, and you can write what I know with some space, and what I need to know with some space. So you can pause the video to do that. Okay, so first let's focus on what we already know based on this. So we know that the cake recipe calls for 4 eggs. So on our piece of paper, we can write 1 cake equals 4 eggs. So in other words, it's going to take 4 eggs to make 1 cake. Now we also know some other information. We know that Jess wants to make 3 cakes. So underneath 1 cake equals 4 eggs, we're going to write 3 cakes equals, and then a question mark, because that's the product that we're trying to solve for. So again, we know that 1 cake takes 4 eggs, and we have to solve for how many eggs that 3 cakes will take. And again, what we need to know is the product, or how many eggs it would take. So let's write down product. And again, the product is the answer for multiplication. Okay, so now we can do our 3 strategies of drawings, manipulatives, and equations. So let's start with drawings. So we're going to first write 4 times 3, because each cake is going to have 4 eggs, and we need to make 3 cakes. So 4 times 3. 4 stands for our rows, and 3 stands for our columns. So we're going to have 4 rows by 3 columns. So in our drawing, let's do 4 rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So on your piece of paper, do 4 dots for 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. And then you're going to have 3 columns. So I'm going to add some columns, and they should line up as much as possible. So now we have 3 columns, 1, 2, and 3. So 4 rows, 3 columns. And now we'll add up all of our dots to figure out how many eggs Jess will need total. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'm going to write an equal sign and then 12 eggs. We figured out by drawing the dots that she'll need 12 eggs. So 4 rows by 3 columns is 12 eggs. So now we're going to follow the same process using our second strategy of manipulatives. So we need 4 rows by 3 columns. So let's start off with making 4 rows. So we've got 1 row, 2nd row, 3rd row, and 4th row. And now we need to add some more columns. So I'm going to start by adding the 2nd column, and you can do the same with your manipulatives. Next, I'm going to add the 3rd column, and you can do the same with yours. Okay, and let's double check. So we should have 4 rows. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 columns. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and now we have to add up all of our stars. Just like we added up all of our dots for the drawings, we're going to add up all of our stars for the manipulatives. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So again, we've got 12 eggs. So whether you use the drawings method or the manipulatives method, it'll have the same answer of 12 eggs for those 3 cakes. Let's try our equation strategy. So we know we have 4 times 3. So 4 times 3, in other words, 4 rows of 3 columns. 4 times 3, and if you know your multiplication facts, then you know that 4 times 3 equals 12. And if you don't know your multiplication facts, that's also okay, because we have from our drawings and manipulatives, we have the answer from that, which is 12 eggs, counting up all those dots, and 12 eggs, counting up all the manipulatives. So either way, we'll know that 4 times 3 equals 12. And let's make sure to add the unit, which is eggs. So 12 eggs. 4 rows times 3 columns is 12 eggs. So in other words, if 1 cake is 4 eggs, then 3 cakes is going to be 12 eggs. So our product is 12 eggs. So I hope that you enjoyed today's lesson about word problems using multiplication. Just to review what we did, we first talked about some vocabulary, and our vocabulary was multiplication, which is the rows by the columns. For example, 5 times 2, and then we figured out the product or the answer. We also talked about division, which is when we're given a total, such as 10, and we're told to divide it into a certain number of groups, such as 2, to find the number in each group. So in this case, a total of 10 divided into 2 equal groups means that there would be 5 in each group. And that is our quotient, which is the answer. Then we talked about equal groups, about how there should be the same amount in each group. So for example, if one group has 2 stars, the other group also needs to have 2 stars. Or if one group has 3 stars, the other group also has to have 3 stars, so they have to be equal numbers, same amount in each group. We also talked about arrays, which were rows by columns. So for example, a 2 by 3 array would have 2 rows and 3 columns. So it would look like this, because we have first row here, second row here, and then we have 1, 2, 3 columns. So that's a 2 by 3 array. Finally, we talked about our vocabulary terms of product, which is used for multiplication, and quotient, which is used for division. So we reviewed our vocabulary. After that, we talked about our 3 strategies when solving for word problems involving multiplication. And our 3 strategies were drawings using dots, manipulatives using your beans or beads or gold stars, whatever you have. And then we talked about our last strategy of equations, using those multiplication facts to find out the answer. So I hope that you enjoyed the lesson, and I will see you back soon for another one.